Chapter 2. The Situation. Thud. 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 Steve retreated several steps, terrified by the sight before him. It seemed the figure in the dressing mirror wasn't himself but a mummified corpse. How could anyone with such a severe wound still be alive? He couldn't believe it and turned his head again to check the other side. Even from a distance and in dim light, the penetrating wound and the deep red bloodstains were unmistakably visible. Steve took a deep breath. Trying to calm himself, he pressed his hand against his left chest and felt the vigorous and rapid beating of his heart. Touching the skin exposed to the air revealed a slight coolness masking the warmth underneath. Squatting down to check if his knees could still bend, Steve then stood up, no longer in a panic. "What's going on?" he murmured, frowning. Planning to check the head wound more carefully, he took 2 steps forward but then paused, realizing the dim light from the blood moon outside wasn't enough to support a careful examination. A fragment of memory flashed through his mind, and Steve turned to look at the gray-white pipe and the metal grill-encased wall lamp next to the desk. This was the mainstream gas lamp of the time, known for its stable flame and excellent lighting. Given Klein Moretti's family situation, not to mention a gas lamp, even an oil lamp would have been too much to hope for. Using candles was more in line with their status. However, 4 years ago, when Klein was burning the midnight oil for his Hoy University entrance exams, his brother Benson believed this was a matter that could affect the family's future. He thought that even if it meant going into debt, they should create the best conditions for him. Of course, Benson, who had been literate and working for several years, was neither reckless nor lacking in methods. Nor did he act without considering the consequences. He convinced the landlord to pay for the installation of gas piping, arguing it would improve the apartment's class and help with future rentals. Meanwhile, he leveraged his job at the import and export company to acquire a new type of gas lamp at nearly cost price, managing to do so without borrowing money, using only savings. With the memory fading, Steve returned to the desk, opened the gas valve, and turned the gas lamp's switch. Click, click, click. The sound of the ignition friction echoed, but the light didn't come as Steve expected. Click, click, click. He tried a few more times, but the gas lamp remained dim. Retracting his hand and pressing the left temple, Steve dredged up memory fragments, searching for the reason. After a few seconds, he turned and walked towards the door, stopping in front of a mechanical device connected to the same gray-white pipe embedded in the wall. This was the gas meter. Looking at the gears and bearings exposed slightly, Steve pulled a coin from his pocket. It was dark yellow, gleaming with copper, featuring a crowned man's head on the front and surrounded by wheat ears with the number 1 on the back. Steve knew this was the basic currency of the Rune Kingdom, called a copper penny. A penny's actual purchasing power was roughly equivalent to $3 or $4 in his world. Before the crossover, this coin had denominations of 5 pennies, half a penny, and a quarter penny, still not refined enough for daily use, requiring rounding up for purchases. After letting the King George III coronation-issued copper penny spin on his fingertip a few times, Steve inserted it into the gas meter's vertical mouth. Ding, ding, dong. As the penny fell to the bottom of the meter, the gears began to turn, playing a short and sweet mechanical melody. Steve watched for a few seconds, then returned to the original wooden desk and turned the gas lamp switch again. Click, 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 pop. A flame ignited, growing rapidly, and bright light first filled the lamp before passing through the transparent glass, casting a warm hue over the room. The darkness receded suddenly, and the crimson withdrew from the window. Steve felt a bit more at ease and quickly walked to the dressing mirror. This time, He scrutinized the temple wound, not missing any detail. After comparing, he noticed that aside from the initial bloodstains, the ghastly wound hadn't bled any further, as if it had received the best possible hemostasis and bandaging. The slowly wriggling gray-white brain and the flesh around the wound, visibly healing at a speed visible to the naked eye, signaled the arrival of healing, perhaps in 30 to 40 minutes, or 2 to 3 hours. Only a shallow trace would remain. A healing effect from crossing over? Steve quirked his right mouth corner, muttering silently. Then, he took a deep breath. Regardless of the reason, at least he was still alive. Settling his mind, he pulled out a piece of soap from a drawer, took one of the worn towels hanging next to the cabinet, then opened the door and headed to the shared washroom on the second floor. Well, the blood on his head needed to be dealt with to avoid always looking like a crime scene. Scaring himself was one thing, but if he frightened his sister Melissa, who needed to get up early tomorrow, that would be a difficult situation to manage. The hallway outside was dark, with only the crimson moonlight from the end window barely outlining the protruding objects, making them look like pairs of monster eyes silently watching the living in the deep night. Steve walked towards the washroom with light, somewhat frightened steps. Inside, the moonlight was stronger, and everything became clearer. Steve stood in front of the wash basin and turned on the tap. The sound of water filled his ears, and he suddenly thought of Mr. Franch, the landlord, since the water bill was included in the rent. The small, thin Mr. Franch, always wearing a top hat, vest, and black suit, would actively inspect the washrooms, eavesdropping on the sound of running water. If the sound was loud, Mr. Franch would forget his gentlemanly manners, fiercely wave his cane, banging on the washroom door, shouting, "Damn thieves! Wasting is shameful. I remember you. If I see it again, take your filthy luggage and get out. Believe me, this is the most economical apartment in Tingen City. You won't find a more generous landlord than me." Quote. Bringing his thoughts back, Steve wet the towel and began to clean the blood from his face. Over and over. After confirming through the washroom's tattered mirror that only the ghastly wound and his pale face remained, Steve felt much relieved. Then, he took off his linen shirt and began to scrub the bloodstains with soap. At that moment, he frowned, realizing there might be other troubles. The exaggerated wound, numerous bloodstains. Besides on himself, there should be traces in the room. A few minutes later, Steve finished with the linen shirt, took the wet towel, and hurried back home. He first wiped the blood handprint off the desk. Then, using the light from the gas lamp, searched for other remnants. He immediately found many blood spots splattered on the floor and under the desk, and by the wall on the left. A yellowish bullet head. Quote, shot himself in the temple with a revolver? The clues suddenly connected, and Steve roughly understood Klein's cause of death. He didn't rush to verify but first carefully wiped away the bloodstains, cleaned up the scene, then picked up the bullet head and returned to the desk, opening the revolver's cylinder to eject the bullets inside. Click, click, click. 5 bullets and 1 casing, all gleaming with brass luster. Indeed, Steve looked at the empty casing, nodding slightly as he reloaded the bullets into the cylinder. His gaze shifted to the open notebook on the desk, where the sentence, "Everyone will die, including me," was written. More questions surged in his mind. Where did the gun come from? Suicide? Or staged as suicide? What could a history graduate of humble origins get involved in? How could such a method of suicide leave only so much blood? Was it because I crossed over in time, bringing a healing benefit? After pondering for a moment, Steve changed into another linen shirt, sat down, and began to think about more important matters. Klein's fate wasn't his primary concern for now. The real issue was figuring out why he crossed over and whether he could cross back. Parents, relatives, close friends, the rich online world, all kinds of delicacies. These were all reasons he urgently wanted to return. Click, click, click. Steve's right hand unconsciously spun the revolver's cylinder, then snapped it back in place. Over and over. Nothing much has changed recently. Just a bit of bad luck. How could I have crossed over out of the blue? Quote, bad luck. Right. I did a luck-changing ritual before dinner tonight. Quote, a lightning bolt struck Steve's mind, illuminating the memories obscured by the fog. As a qualified keyboard politician, keyboard historian, keyboard economist, keyboard biologist, keyboard folklorist, he always claimed to know a little about everything, though his friends often teased him for only knowing a little about everything. And magic was one of those things. Last year, when he returned to his hometown, he found an old, thread-bound, vertical book titled, Secret Records of Qin and Han Magic, at an old bookstall. It seemed interesting, and he thought it would help him show off online. So he bought it. Unfortunately, interest came quickly and went quickly. The vertical format made it difficult to read, and he only flipped through the beginning before tossing the book aside. When a series of misfortunes hit him last month, losing his phone, clients running away, making mistakes at work, and a series of bad events coming one after another, he randomly remembered the secret records, mentioned a luck-changing ritual at the beginning. It was incredibly simple, requiring no foundation. Just take the main food of the area, divide it into 4 portions, place them in the 4 corners of the room, on tables, cabinets, etc. Then stand in the center of the room. Walk 4 steps counterclockwise to form a square. With the first step, sincerely chant, blessed by Xuanwang Immortal. The second step, blessed by Xuanwang Heaven. The third step, blessed by Xuanwang Emperor. And the fourth step, blessed by Xuanwang Heavenly Sovereign. After walking, close your eyes and wait in place for 5 minutes. And the ritual is considered successful. With a "it doesn't cost anything" mentality, he dug out the book, followed the instructions, and performed the ritual before dinner. However, nothing happened at the time. Who knew? By midnight, he had crossed over. There's a good chance it was that luck-changing ritual. I'll try it here tomorrow. If it really was because of it, then I have hope of crossing back. Steve stopped flicking the revolver cylinder and sat up straight. Regardless, he had to try. A dead horse must be treated like a living horse doctor.